I'm sure if you sat down, closed your eyes, and listened to your body a little bit, you would already know that. But I'm also sure that you have encountered doctors who have told you. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of What the Heck Is. Today I want to talk to you about a condition with the acronym POTS. P-O-T-S. If you are interested in why doctors do such a bad job of treating this condition, and even your cardiologist or neurologist may not really know what POTS is, stay to the end of the video and I will explain that. I will also tell you, if you have POTS, why you didn't cause it by inactivity or laziness, and why there is no medical evidence to support that claim by doctors. First, what the heck is POTS? POTS stands for Postural Orthostatic Tachycardia Syndrome. It's a form of dysautonomia. Dysautonomia is an umbrella term for multiple conditions which can affect how your autonomic nervous system works. The autonomic nervous system is the system of the body that regulates your heart rate, breathing, body temperature, sweating, saliva, pupillary contraction, urination, sexual arousal, digestion. The autonomic nervous system regulates all of those and more, but there aren't specific organs related to it. You know, when you learn in, say, middle school or high school biology about the body's systems, usually what you're learning about is organ systems. So you have the cardiovascular system, and you could draw a picture of the heart and the veins and the arteries. Or you're learning about the skeletal system, and you can draw a picture of the skeleton. The autonomic nervous system is essentially invisible and is comprised of mainly two chemicals which either spark responses or inhibit responses in your body. Each particular form of dysautonomia is characterized by dysregulation of a different system. The main system that is dysregulated in POTS is heart rate and blood flow. A major clue to that is in the name, tachycardia, relating to how your heart works. To break down the word a little bit more so you can understand it before I go into specific symptoms, we have postural. That means that you go from one position to another. Those positions are either from laying down to sitting up or from sitting up to standing. Orthostatic, standing, being in a different position. Tachycardia, which is a fast heart rate. And then syndrome, meaning this is the clinical thing that we see in these patients. Because the big obvious dysregulation in POTS is your heart rate, the way it's diagnosed is purely through checking your heart rate. To be officially diagnosed with POTS, your heart rate has to increase by at least 30 beats per minute when you go from a reclined position to a standing position. That jump can happen immediately or within 10 minutes of standing. So if your heart rate doesn't jump by 30 beats per minute right away, that doesn't disqualify you. They wait 10 minutes. Commonly and most officially, the way to test for POTS and those changes in heart rate is a tilt table test. That is where they strap you to this hospital bed looking thing, start you out laying flat, and then pull you up to, I think, 70 degrees. While you're strapped to the tilt table, you'll have nodes in different parts of your body. Those will check for your heart rate, but also sometimes they check your sweat response because that can be dysregulated also, and it's easy to test them both at once. The other thing is that those beats per minute have to be reached with no decrease in blood pressure. That's a really important thing to note because so many people, even in the medical field, when they hear that you have POTS or that you have presyncope, which is almost fainting, they assume that you have low blood pressure because that's a pretty common reason for fainting or feeling dizzy. But to be diagnosed with POTS, you have to have a significant increase in heart rate without a drop in blood pressure. Some people with POTS do have blood pressure drops, but that means that they have something else going on or some other form of dysautonomia in addition to POTS. Although heart rate is the easiest thing to test and the most obvious sign for most people with POTS, the condition truly affects almost every system of the body. The heart rate just helps doctors to put us in a category and gives a good indication that the whole autonomic nervous system isn't working properly. Here's an example of what the autonomic nervous system should do and what can happen when it doesn't work as it should. In a normal person, when you stand up, the equivalent of roughly 2 water bottles full of blood rush down toward your feet. Your autonomic nervous system kicks in, constricts the blood vessels, slightly increases your heart rate and your blood pressure, and blood is pumped back up toward your heart and brain, therefore evenly distributing the blood despite the fact that you're standing and gravity wants to force the blood down. In a person with POTS, they stand up, the blood flows down toward their feet, and for a variety of reasons, including the fact that the autonomic nervous system does not tell the blood vessels to constrict properly, we don't get that blood back up into our brain and hearts. So we don't get that equilibrium when we're standing. Our bodies know that this is happening and that there's not enough blood in the upper parts of our body, so our hearts beat really, really fast trying to compensate and pump more blood through our bodies. Unfortunately, because of all the dysregulation, it is never really successful in getting the blood to circulate evenly through the body. You can see how this might cause some problems. The most common symptoms of POTS are dizziness, nausea, lightheadedness, headaches, painful blood pooling in the legs, temperature dysregulation, and something called coat hanger pain, which is pain in the base of your neck and across your shoulders. Think the shape of the base of a coat hanger. That's where a lot of people with POTS feel pain. The reason for that is because if all of your blood is stuck at your feet, then the muscles of your upper body, particularly the big muscles in your shoulder and neck, aren't getting enough oxygenated blood, and that causes pain. 2 things that are not currently considered to be directly related to POTS are fainting and low blood pressure. As I mentioned, you actually aren't allowed to have a drop in blood pressure in the official diagnostic criteria for POTS. Because low blood pressure is often the reason for fainting, POTS isn't specifically associated with fainting. People who have POTS can faint, but it's not one of the major symptoms or considerations, and it's certainly not part of the diagnostic criteria for POTS. So if you think you have a lot of these symptoms and you see your heart rate go up, but you don't experience fainting, don't think that you're disqualified from a POTS diagnosis. It's actually even more likely that you have POTS because you're not fainting. POTS symptoms can cause some pretty significant issues with daily life. I'll give you some examples of my own POTS symptoms. Because my body doesn't efficiently pump blood to the upper parts of it, I have pretty severe neck and shoulder pain pretty much all the time because I just lack oxygen in those muscles and they cramp a lot. When I'm standing, I have such a significantly lower blood volume in my brain than most people that I have very significant hearing and vision impairments when I'm standing. That's part of the reason that I use my wheelchair, because if I can't hear you or see you clearly in a social situation, or say when I'm signing papers at the receptionist desk at a doctor's office, then I can't take care of myself in those spaces. So I use a wheelchair because when I'm sitting, my POTS symptoms are much less and I can see clearly and I can hear what people are saying clearly. Bet you didn't know that hearing was affected by POTS. Another pretty significant symptom for me, it's not necessarily debilitating, but it is annoying, is the blood pooling in my feet and ankles. They swell slightly, they're almost constantly purple, and they're quite painful because they lack oxygenated blood. Your blood needs to circulate all the way through your body, through your heart, to get oxygen. And if it's just sitting at your feet, it's lacking oxygen. So it's there, but it's not particularly useful. And that's pretty painful. I'd have to say one of the most debilitating symptoms that I experience with dysautonomia is inefficient pupillary dilation. That means that my eyes don't respond to light as quickly as others. So when I'm exposed to bright light, sometimes my pupils don't constrict properly, and so I'm exposed to too much light, which causes significant light sensitivity and photosensitive migraines. Sometimes my pupils will eventually adjust and constrict appropriately, but sometimes they don't, and they're stuck kind of open and exposed to too much light for as long as I'm in a lighted space. All over the internet, you'll see memes or quotes or things like that that say that doctors have compared POTS to end-stage AIDS or kidney failure or things like that in terms of quality of life. And knowing how some of these symptoms affect me and others, you can kind of see where that comes from. I'm not sure if those memes are actually factual. I was more focused on other kinds of research today and not really trying to debunk that myth. But it does give a really good insight into what people with POTS deal with on a daily basis and how they might feel. Another meme that you might see floating around that I think actually describes POTS really well is to imagine that you have 100-degree fever and you are dehydrated and you just ran a 5K and then you spun around in circles. Imagine how you'd feel. Imagine how dizzy and nauseous and disoriented, how badly affected your vision or hearing would be from all of that, and how much you would want to just lay flat and not move. That is a really great explanation of how people with POTS feel often and sometimes all the time, depending on the severity of the condition. So why do you go to a cardiologist or a neurologist who you've been referred to deal with POTS and they say, yeah, we don't really know what that is? They mean we, as in the medical community, we. The medical community knows so little about how the autonomic nervous system works and what causes it to become dysregulated that they really don't know. A doctor may send you to a cardiologist because they know that POTS involves tachycardia, and so like, oh, it must be a heart problem. You go to the cardiologist and they say it's not a heart problem, it's an autonomic nervous system problem. There's nothing functionally wrong with your heart. Here's some blood pressure meds, which sometimes they do, or medicines to reduce your heart rate. Then you could be sent to a neurologist because the thought is there are neurotransmitters involved in autonomic nervous system regulation. And the neurologist says, we don't know enough about those neurotransmitters or how to deal with them. It's not a structural brain problem. There's no electrical problem that we can see, so it's not our problem either. Wear some compression hose. The short answer to the reason that your doctor doesn't know what POTS is that the medical community doesn't know what POTS is. In the sense that we don't know many of the mechanisms or why people have this dysregulation, and we also don't know how to fix it. Some people are helped by medication or compression hose or things like that, but don't expect miracles from your doctor or the medical community when they haven't fully figured out what it is or how to deal with it yet. It's not particularly their fault, it's just medicine isn't there yet. And now to bust the million-dollar myth. Did your inactivity cause POTS, or is your laziness making POTS worse? No. There is no medical evidence for that. I will link a couple of great articles by the NIH in my video description so that you can read some real clear medical evidence that says it's not your fault. I'm sure if you sat down, closed your eyes, and listened to your body a little bit, you would already know that. But I'm also sure that you have encountered doctors who have told you either POTS was brought on by you not exercising or moving for a long time, or that you could get better from your POTS if you just got up off the couch and moved. It's not true, friends. It's the classic chicken and the egg, which came first. And these NIH articles will help you to understand that POTS came first. I can tell you this in my own life. I was a super active kid and young adult, and from the time I was 9, 10 years old, I had POTS. I almost fainted in church every single Sunday. I had a really hard time running on the cross-country team because I couldn't see while I was running. Just because I'm inactive now and have POTS does not mean that my inactivity caused my POTS. I think one of the articles also mentions that the big hurdle to getting better from POTS is that 60% of patients can't do the prescribed exercises, physical therapy, or rehabilitation programs that are suggested to make POTS symptoms better. So if we can't do the exercises that are prescribed, maybe the problem is that we need to figure out how to fix the POTS symptoms so that we can exercise and build up more muscle mass, endurance, etc. Whew, it makes me so mad to know that doctors, with the same information that we have and more, still continue to tell patients that it's their fault, they caused it, or their laziness is prolonging their suffering. Don't listen to those people. Listen to the science and know that your condition is valid and that you are doing your best. I'm sending lots of love out today to any of you watching this who deal with POTS or other forms of dysautonomia. Take a break when you need to, drink some water when you need to, and don't let doctors bully you.